What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another Bring the Juice Colts podcast live stream. Thank you all so much for tuning in, guys. We are finally on a live stream. Cody and myself, guys. It's been quite a long time. Cody was telling me the other day, like, man, it's been a hot minute since I've been on a stream. And, I thought today we might as well do it today, Cody, because I woke up this morning and I'm thinking to myself, we got Colts football back this week, man. Unbelievable. It is here, Cody. It's here.
And not a moment too soon, man. It's been about time already. But yeah, definitely excited, man, that, hey, in less than 1 week, we will be at training camp, which is definitely very much a great thing. And it kind of just creeps up on you a little bit in a very good way where you're like, oh, wow, okay, football's next week, or I guess this week now, depending how you count the week. But
Absolutely.
crazy, man. Crazy that we are here and we are able to actually talk about something related to Colts football and some new information. We've been talking about a lot of the same stuff. So, yeah, man, definitely excited to get back into the swing of things.
Absolutely, man. Well, hey, listen, guys, thank you so much for tuning in on this beautiful Sunday evening. Do us a favor. Be sure to like the stream wherever you're watching it right now. Be sure to comment. Be sure to come over to the YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe, guys. We're on the push for 20,000 subscribers. So please help us accomplish that this season. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll get to the comments here in a second. Speaking of comments as well, if you have a question that you'd like us to answer in this stream, if you have something that you want to know, be sure to comment that in the comments down below, and we'll be sure to get to them. We want to have a little bit of a discussion with you guys today. Some great things happening this year, guys. A couple different sponsors coming up this year, a couple other opportunities for us. So, we're all in on this year, and we're excited for another great year of Indianapolis Colts football. Like Cody said, him and I are going to be going back to training camp this year. Not quite as many practices, Cody, as we typically have seen in recent years, but nevertheless, we're still going to get a chance to go to a couple.
Yep.
You and I are both going to the 27th practice and on the 9th of August. So if anyone is going on either of those days, be sure to hit us up. Let us know that you're going, and we'd love to be able to chat with some of you guys and be able to meet some of you guys. And we greatly appreciate all the support that you guys have given us. So again, thank you so much. Be sure to like this stream, guys. It helps it push out to more and more people. And I'm super excited to get this thing back into going, feeling like a grinding kind of day for content. And I'm glad this week we're finally going to get a chance to get some of that. Jacob with a W. What's up, man? Smoky Dabs 420. Yo, Cody and Derek. Sorry, I've been absent on streams. Work has been hectic, but glad I could catch this stream. Well, it's kind of funny, Cody, because I've looked at it, and what's funny is from when we had the draft, the only live stream that we have had outside of the three draft streams that we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we've only had 6 streams in the last 3 months. So we really haven't streamed a lot this off season. And, there really hasn't been a lot of reasons to go live during this off season. But nevertheless, we're here now. We're going to have a bunch more coming up, guys. Don't worry. Elslo 10-7 all day. Watch. Brandon Long, what's up, man? Let's go Colts Nation. Michigan Wolverines. What up, Derek and Cody? Can't wait for training camp and season to start. Let's go Colts, baby. Hey, love it, man. Damn, that's wild. I just barely hit 500 subs, let alone 20K. It takes a while, man. It takes a while, but you can get there. Elslo saying, where can I get some Bring the Juice shirts? Yeah. So, if you want to, get a Bring the Juice shirt, let us know, message myself on, Twitter or Instagram or something like that. be sure to mainly if you just message me on Twitter, that is the best way to do it. That way I can get a hold of your info personally, and then we can take care of some orders that way. So if you'd like that, feel free to do so. Also,
yeah, Derek, you may need to open up your DMs to anybody, because I don't think there may be people that can't. I had somebody who said they couldn't. So
I don't even know how to change that.
So it's somewhere in your. I know you can do it in your settings.
Got to be in your settings, right?
Yeah, I just have never really messed with it. But maybe I have to. Maybe I should do that too. I think I have done that actually. I
was gonna say I don't feel like I've turned off notifications for everyone.
Okay.
If you guys can't message me, just tag me in a post, and then I can make sure that I can do that for you guys.
So, okay, I found it, Derek. So, privacy and safety in your settings, there's a part for direct message. I found out mine was turned off. I didn't even realize it. So,
so direct messages.
It must have just randomly turned. They must have just randomly turned them off.
Huh? Yeah, you're right. Only verified users allows it on there. So, I don't know. That's definitely strange, but oh well. Okay, I got it figured out now, guys. So now everyone should be able to
message. Yep. So similar shirts, obviously not the same because those are draft shirts, but similar-ish to the ones we were wearing during the first night of the draft, I'm assuming.
Yep. So yeah, make sure you guys message me on Twitter. I can get you guys set up with those if you guys are interested. Are you guys in Indy? No, we're not in Indy. I know Cody's a lot closer to Indianapolis than myself. So
I'm about 30, 40 minutes from Muncie. So if that gives you any point of reference, I'm a little bit south of Muncie. So I actually was just in Muncie today. So getting some stuff for the house. Yeah. I know, man. Well, when talking about just how crazy it's been, I feel like specifically like this summer has just been wild. Like there's just been, it feels like it's just been so much more things than a typical summer. And so just the availability, I think, for both of us has just been not as near what it's been in the years past. And obviously with just different things and different life situations, it's been harder to do live streams and just consistency. But we've really been trying, man. We've really been trying, at least with the videos, to keep them out on a semi-consistent basis. But it's definitely been tricky, man. It's definitely been, interesting to try to navigate that. Like this year, I feel like, well, now just being married and all that stuff, like it's just so different, and just having to navigate that. And I know, like, obviously you having to, navigate, just not the single life anymore. It's just different. And so things just look a little different, but that's okay.
Yeah.
He was asking, how did we become Indy fans? That's a great question.
My dad was a Peyton Manning fan when he came into the league, and when I was growing up, that's how it was.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, Peyton Manning obviously was a major reason. I would say he's the biggest reason, but I honestly, man, I grew up in Indiana, so like everybody liked the Colts. But my family really wasn't like big sports fans, and I'm the oldest of four. And so I just remember it really started. I think my first game I remember watching was probably, I think it was the AFC Championship, Colts Patriots, and then watched the Super Bowl with my grandparents and watched the Colts win. And then really from there, I've kind of just been a diehard ever since. Started really watching them in 2007, and then just kind of been following them every single year. And so that's kind of how I did. And then eventually my whole family got into it, and then my grandpa got into it, and it was just kind of cool how it all worked out. So they kind of like they kind of tell me like, you got us into football, which is just, that's kind of weird because it's usually the other way around. So it's kind of cool. And I played football growing up. I know you did the same thing, Derek. So just seeing a team that's local or local-ish for you, that's good, because let's be honest, like, the Colts were, when we were growing up, they were the team, right? They were one of those premier teams. And let's be honest, like Bengals and Browns weren't that. I mean, not really. Like the Bengals more so, but like, so Peyton Manning for sure. Major thing.
Yeah, huge reason. A lot of people like the Indianapolis Colts for that exact reason. Again, guys, make sure that you're liking the stream wherever you're listening to. Be sure to head to the YouTube channel and be sure to like the stream over here. Watch it on YouTube. That would help us a lot more than anyone that's watching it on Twitter or on Facebook. But if you can, please do that. We greatly appreciate it. But anyways, guys, yeah, again, just make sure that we're putting questions in the comments. If you guys want to have any of your questions answered, we want to definitely get that going as much as we can. I will say this, Cody, before we get into more questions here. I'll say this. Yeah, for as far as like content being slower this year, I think it's just been that you and I have just been busier with stuff outside of the podcast, which is definitely taken up a good amount of time. But like you said, we've been pumping out videos pretty consistently, regardless of that sort of thing happening. But I think this year I'm just hoping that there isn't a situation like what we had last year when it came to the Jonathan Taylor stuff. You got to remember that was on the first couple days of training camp, and that's what we were dealing with. And you know, I really hope, I'm really hoping that we don't have another contract dispute, a big contract dispute this offseason like we did last year, because that was wild.
I gotta find the picture, because if you all remember,
Cody, man. I like your story better. Derek, I'm gonna let your story pass. You know, hey, listen, I don't have much of a story when it comes to that, man. I mean, it is what it is. I'm pretty blunt about it.
Yeah. I mean, that's cool.
Are you screaming at games this year? I know you mean streaming, but yes, I will be screaming during the streaming of games this year. Absolutely.
That will be happening.
Yeah, that will happen a lot this year. Yes, I will be streaming every game.
Okay. This is
maybe a week or two. I might go to a game.
Yeah.
And I know there's one game this year that I know Cody's gonna do versus myself at the end of the year.
Yeah.
But yes, I will be streaming 90% of the games. Yeah.
Yes. So this was the picture from last year, if y'all remember. Just angry, just not happy at all.
The look of anger, just the whole training camp.
Oh, that was terrible. I mean, I remember getting that notification that he requested a trade, and I was like, oh my gosh, tell me it's not real. Like, that was crazy. Now, fortunately, they worked it out. But my word, dude, that was wild. That drama for like weeks and weeks. I'm like, just freaking give this guy his money at this point.
Well, remember, it started like the second day of training camp. We knew something was up. And then from that point forward, he didn't get his contract until what? Like week 4 of the NFL season. So it was 2 months of dealing with that, Cody. I mean, that was 2 months.
It's good for content, bad for just
the state our mental health of dealing with this team.
Yeah. Yeah, very true.
Because we were like, oh my God, the worst thing that could happen, your best offensive player, maybe your best player in general, is threatening to leave your team. Like, I mean, come on now.
Yeah.
Which is why when we're talking about the Brandon Ayuk stuff, I know people have mentioned that with the Colts, but like, remember, I mean, Jonathan Taylor had the same exact thing happen, and we saw what happened, right? So, I mean, I just don't see a situation in which San Francisco lets him go. Like, honestly, I really don't, because he's one of your top 3 most important players on your entire offense. 100%. He has to be out there.
Yeah. No doubt. So, Jonathan Taylor, yeah.
It is what it is, guys. We're not going to talk.
I just got to say, man, it's so nice. Obviously, knock on wood, but it's so nice that you're actually like entering training camp with really nothing to talk about, like in terms of like negative distractions. Like, it's so nice. I feel like every year there's been something. Some
that we
sort
have
of
to worry about
thing. Yeah, that you have to worry about. And so it's just refreshing for once to kind of just be like, all right, like AR's healthy. He's good to go. Jonathan Taylor's locked up. Michael Pittman's locked up. Pretty much all our key guys are locked up.
Yeah, there's nothing that's an immediate distraction before training camp actually happens, which is nice.
Right. It's refreshing, honestly. It really is. So
yeah,
it's not, I'm like, I'll take a drama-free off season. Like, this is nice, man. This is really nice.
We know there's going to be some stuff during training camp, guys. Obviously, the drama is going to remain there because, we knock on wood. I mean, it happens with every team. I think that only once in a blue moon does a team escape training camp without any severe injuries that happens to anyone. I mean, so far in the off season, the worst thing that's happened was Daniel Scott knowing that he's going to not play this year again. But outside of that, no major drama. Like you said, AR has said he's fine. We knew that before minicamp was over. So it's not a big deal there. Ultimately, like you said, going into it, not having to worry too much about any significant thing definitely is a little bit of a refresher. But remember, we also gotta remember we haven't hit training camp yet. We'll have to wait and see what happens on Thursday and Saturday this week and see what it's about. But let's go ahead and hop into some actual questions here. Does year 3 under Gus Bradley mean familiarity and better defense, or is the scheme broken? So he's basically asking, Cody, does this defense simply get better because people are more familiar with Gus Bradley's system now, or is the scheme just what it is and, you take the good and the bad with it? I mean, what do you say to that?
I mean, I have my own issues with the scheme, to be honest with you. Maybe not necessarily even the scheme, but just how Gus Bradley doesn't utilize and make the defense more unpredictable and more complex. Like, I understand there's something nice about the simplicity of the defense, but my gosh, look at Shane Steichen and what the Colts do and how unpredictable they are on offense. And look how it's like it's more of like, to steal a old, coach's term, it feels like you're being, the hammer, not the nail a lot of times when it comes to the offense. But on the defense, it almost just like you're reacting instead of attacking. And I personally want to see more of that attacking. The Colts were one of, if not the lowest blitzing team in the NFL last year. And I mean, we saw what happened. Again, pass rush, like we talk about, it's very important. And there's a reason the Colts emphasized it this year by getting Latu's, with essentially the first pick on defense in the draft. And so, but still with that, I think there are ways that Gus Bradley, he has to change and tweak certain things. Like, he has to get more aggressive when, he can't always just rush 4. I understand, like, that's important and you need to be able to do that, but you also need to be more unpredictable. Right. And so that's kind of where I am. And I think just naturally, guys will be more comfortable in the system. I mean, you didn't have any major additions, obviously Latu's the biggest one there on the defense, but when it comes to, your back half of your defense, like, you didn't have really any major changes. So you're really hoping that, like, year 2 in the scheme for a lot of these guys, or maybe even year 3 for some guys, really can be, a good step for them in the right direction. Right. Especially those guys that are entering year 2, hoping that now they're more comfortable going into year 2 as opposed to their rookie season. But I think there's truth with both of those things. I think both of those things can be true. Yes, I think the defense will be better in certain ways, but also, Derek, I do think that I think there's a flaw just in the way that Gus Bradley approaches and coaches up the defense and schemes it up. I just think there's more that you can do on the defensive side of the ball, where I'd rather you see you be more aggressive on the defensive end, like we see on the offense. I mean, that's just my opinion. I would rather see that happen. And I just don't think you see that enough with Gus Bradley, to be honest with you. And I think that's why you saw, in certain ways, quarterbacks be able to kind of dice up the Colts at times, because the Colts just were comfortable sitting back, rushing 4, and not necessarily applying the pressure where it needed. So that's my biggest gripe with Gus.
Yeah. So, I mean, this does kind of work both ways. I mean, just like anything, the more time you spend doing something, the better you're going to get at it. Clearly, because guys in year one of a system will never understand the system as good as they do in year 2 or year 3 and year 4 and beyond and beyond and beyond. It's how everything works. If you spend an ample amount of time doing anything and learning and understanding something, you are going to naturally understand it better as you tend to do more of it. But the answer to the question is, is the scheme actually broken? And the problem you have with, and especially in the NFL now, right, Cody, because you hire defensive coordinators, you hire coordinators because they like to do things a certain way. And you bring guys in that runs things the way the head coach can understand it, and the head coach can allow a defensive coordinator to do things. But it's the age-old question, and we've been saying it since last year. We're talking about how some guys, like the way the system is ran for the Indianapolis Colts, it doesn't run very well, because the problem you have with the scheme is this cover 3 disguise scheme that Gus Bradley runs. The main proponent to it is the defensive line needs to win with minimum pressure, and that's going to ultimately resolve in having more people in the back, being able to stay alive, not giving up the big plays, and being able to stay on their feet, creating opportunities. Well, the problem you have is that scheme doesn't fit very well for the Indianapolis Colts right now. Yes, they had 50 sacks last year, but again, the efficiency wise to which they're getting after the quarterback was not sufficient enough to be able to run that kind of scheme with the secondary that you have right now. You weren't efficiently getting after the quarterback. You only have one true linebacker that's halfway good at being in pass coverage. And then your secondary, which is full of young guys who are in their first year at the position. And that was the problem that you had. A lot of it had to do with the guys just not being fully understanding of the system. So I hate it because, especially with, if you get paid these millions of dollars as a coach to be able to devise a system, like that's the whole point, is you're telling these players they need to run your system, right? We're not devising a system based off the strengths of our players. We're devising a system that the players have to adapt to. That's what you're asking all these guys to do when they get in here. And that's a lot of the times the issue that you have is these coaches have ways that they do things, and you just have to learn to it. Now, that's one of the reasons why people draft the way that they do, Cody, because they may not be the best player available, but if there's one guy that plays the position a certain way and another guy is better at the way that you run things, you're going to pick the guy that runs things the way that you do, because that guy won't take as much time to be able to adapt to what you want to run. So that's the issue with it right now. And you know what? Honestly, Cody, I don't mind if Gus Bradley wants to run things a certain way. I get it. Everyone has a scheme. Everyone understands the game better in different ways than others, which that's the diversity of thought in the NFL. That's fine. Every coordinator has something different that they run. But the problem you have with it also is the inability to adapt to the issue. And that's where you came in, Cody, and you mentioned something it's the blitzing. I mean, the Colts over the last 2 years have blitzed less than any team in the NFL. And yet for a team that has consistently over the last few years been ineffective at getting to the quarterback on an efficient basis, to not blitz just doesn't make much sense, because if you know your front four isn't doing the job that they need to, and you have a young secondary, and you know you're not getting after the quarterback, and therefore you know that means your system is going to be flawed, and you don't take any opportunities to try to amp it up to make it a little bit harder, just a little bit harder for that defense or for the offense to get things going, you are either incompetent or you just don't know what you're doing, or you're just choosing to ignore it. So that's the problem you have with a Gus Bradley system is I don't think the system is flawed, Cody. I think the scheme is fine. The problem is you don't have the players right now to fit your scheme. That's the problem you have. Until you get a front four that can efficiently get after the quarterback and have secondary guys that are getting better and staying on the field, that we'll never know how good the scheme is. Honestly, we'll never know until we actually get the players that are needed to run that scheme. So
and I think that's why you've seen the Colts of the last two off seasons now essentially basically say the personnel we had was not good enough to run this scheme, right? That's why they went and paid Samson Ebukam what they paid him. That's why they drafted Laiatu Latu in the first round, despite the fact that Kwity Paye, was a former first round pick, is because they're working. I think they're still working towards getting those personnel. And right now you feel like the personnel is getting to that point where you feel better about it. Even with like a guy like Jalen Carlies that you drafted, you converted into linebacker. You mentioned you really didn't have a lot of guys that excelled in pass coverage last year. He's a guy that could potentially fit there. So I'm not saying it's perfect. I think there's still some tweaking that needs to be done on the defense, especially in the secondary, and we'll see on that. But I think the Colts are getting there. I think that they're getting there in terms of finding their personnel and getting to the point where they feel like they can get consistent pressure. And they're hoping Latu can kind of be that, big piece that can maybe take this team over the edge when it comes to that on the defensive side of things and getting after the quarterback consistently. Because, yes, while he said the sack numbers were fine last year, they broke the franchise record. It's crazy, like in one hand to say you broke the franchise record for sacks, but it still wasn't good enough. But that was just the reality of it. The efficiency-wise, it just wasn't where you needed it to be last year, getting after the quarterback. And I think, honestly, you can point to a young secondary, and that's fine. But I think just the efficiency of getting after the quarterback was probably fundamentally the worst and most disappointing thing, even though the numbers looked good on paper. So I think the Colts understand that, and they're getting to that point. Are they there yet? I don't think they're quite there yet. But if Latu can hit the ground running, man, because we know how consistent he was in the last 2 years at UCLA, if he can get to that point, where he is, where he can like be that consistent, guy that can get 12 to 15 sacks per year or whatever you want to project on there. And it's not just inflated like it was with a few guys last year, then I think, this scheme works a lot better. I think it just works a lot better if you can have that number one dominant guy, because we even saw it with Gus Bradley in Vegas. He had a guy like Max Crosby, right? And that definitely helped in a lot of different ways as well. So if you can have a guy like that, that just changes the entire game for your defense. Obviously any defense would love to have, a superstar pass rusher on the edge, but I think with how, like you said, predicated it is on the front four getting home, I think that's why the Colts have made the emphasis they've made at the defensive end specific position, because they know they're not there yet, and they're hoping, with Latu and maybe, even a couple of these other guys taking another step, they can get to that point. That's kind of what I feel, kind of why we've seen the Colts make the moves they've made on defense, because they believe if you can get a good pass rush, doesn't matter how maybe young your secondary is, it's going to help them. It's going to make your defense better, which, I can't say I totally disagree with that. So I get where the Colts are coming from in that aspect. So.
All right, next question we have here, Cody. I want y'all honest opinion. Do y'all see us in the playoffs this year? I'll start with this one. Well, the problem you have is, the problem you have, Cody, is this AFC is so loaded right now. Like, it's absolutely insane. Now, the thing is injuries happen. Injuries happen throughout the season, and sometimes to unfortunate positions. We saw like the Chargers were second to last in the AFC last year. But we know the Chargers are not the second worst team in the AFC. Let's just be honest with ourselves. The New York Jets lost Aaron Rodgers 3 plays into their season. Let's not act like that didn't play a huge factor into their record, right? So there's a lot of things that can change when it comes to this kind of situation. So, I mean, that's what you have here. But the biggest aspect is who's your coach at the end of the day, and do you trust your coach to be able to lead your team when the injuries start piling up and start figuring things out? Now, obviously, for the Indianapolis Colts, they were without Anthony Richardson for a great chunk of the year, and you're missing Jonathan Taylor for part of the year. You're missing most of your secondary for most of the year. So there was a lot of things that happened to the Indianapolis Colts, but yet they were only a few snaps away from not only making the playoffs, but winning the division on top of that. So there's a lot of opportunities for the Indianapolis Colts to make it this year, but you have to be honest and look at the difference here, right? So Baltimore, they won the AFC last year. Don't project them not making the playoffs this year. They're still going to probably run their division, even with Joe Burrow being back. Buffalo Bills, I know they lost Stephon Diggs, and they know they lost a bunch of people on defense, but they're still going to be good. They're still going to compete. They still got Josh Allen. They're over there. They're fine. Kansas City Chiefs, you can't ever deny them. They are 100% going to be in it. No question about it. And then obviously the AFC South right now runs through Houston. So the 4 teams that won it last year in their divisions, you could see them winning it again, likely. Now Cleveland, depending on how Deshaun Watson plays this next year, even so, Cleveland has one of the best rosters and one of the best coaches in the league. So obviously, Kevin Stefanski won Coach of the Year last year. So Cleveland definitely is going to be in it. The Miami Dolphins 100% are going to be in it because they have the number 1 offense in the NFL during the regular season. So they're clearly in it. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, they went 10-7 last year. By some miracle, made it into the playoffs at the end of the year, and they improved their quarterback situation, I would like to think, with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields over there now. The Cincinnati Bengals are going to get Joe Burrow back. So that's just 8 teams. And then like I mentioned at the start, the Chargers are going to get Justin Herbert back. They gave him some weapons, and they kept most of their defense, which is still pretty dang good. And the New York Jets, I'd like to think if Aaron Rodgers is even half of what he once was, that's a team that will have a winning record this next year. So the Colts are going to have a ton of competition, and they're going to have to deal with Jacksonville. As much as we hate to admit it, they're going to have to deal with Jacksonville too. So there's 10 teams, Cody. There's 10 teams legitimately that all have real legitimate excuses to all make the playoffs. And then you talk about the Indianapolis Colts. So can I see a situation where they do make it? Absolutely. But is it going to be, is there a good chance of it? If injuries don't happen like it did last year for a good chunk of these teams, I'd say it's going to be very hard. Honestly, Cody, it's going to be very hard if they don't win the division. Because if you don't win the division, it's a 50-50 shot on whether or not you're going to even have a chance to make the wild card.
Yeah, but let's be honest. Some of these teams, they're going to be hyped up, and it's not going to come to fruition. Like we said this a couple years ago, and then there was always those teams that inevitably completely disappoint, crash and burn. So yeah, well, yes, you look at that and you say, oh my gosh, there's so many teams. I feel like there's going to be some teams that aren't going to live up to the hype. That's just the reality of it. I do feel like the Colts, despite the fact that, they had all these issues last year with all these injuries, I mean, gosh, they were missing quarterback, running back, a couple starting corners, and just so many other issues when it came to it. And they still were a few plays away, like you mentioned, from, but making the playoffs, winning the division. So I don't think it's really out of the realm of possibility at all. And it really will depend, I think, on Anthony Richardson and his development. I mean, what does he look like in year 2? Obviously the big question we ask all the time is, can he stay healthy? And if he can, what does he look like as a quarterback? Because we really haven't been able to evaluate him over the course of even like half a season. So, yeah, that's kind of my biggest question marks. But, I mean, Shane Steichen's a very good coach. He proved that last year, and I think the Colts have a great chance here. But it is a tougher schedule this year. Absolutely, 100%. There's going to be a lot of teams Colts are going to have to face this year that it's going to test and see, where are they right now? Where do they stack up in this pretty loaded AFC? So I'm very intrigued with that. But, yeah, I mean, I think like you said, the Colts, they have a chance here, man. They really do. But, I mean, at the end of the day, you just got to take care of business in your division, win the division, and then the rest won't matter. You don't have to care about, the majority of those other teams. So, if you can win the division and start out strong, win some of these games like you should have won last year. I mean, you think about it, that Cleveland game that slipped away. I mean, even that New Orleans Saints game, like the Colts were in that one, but obviously the Saints pulled away because Tony Brown can't cover anybody. And a few other games that the Colts were in, but they just ended up not being able to finish, like the Rams game. And even just some crap performances they had, like against the Falcons or, whatever. There's a lot of those where you're like, man, any other day, but for whatever reason, the Colts just were not on their game that day. But like some of those games that you're like, you should have won that game. Like you really should have won that game. If they can come away with some of those tightly contested games, a few more wins, I think they have a good chance to do that. I mean, that's how close it is, Derek. It's like, heck, if the Colts win, if they win one of those games that they lost, I mean, it doesn't matter how, week 17 or week 18 played out. So, yeah, I'm intrigued. But, I mean, it does obviously always start with Anthony Richardson, and you definitely have some positive things that he did last year, and very exciting player, obviously. And so his biggest thing is staying healthy and just continuing to develop as a quarterback.
Yeah, so I think the path is very clear, though. Beat the Texans.
Yep.
Yeah, 100%. And, I was thinking about that, Cody. And, I think it's interesting because remember in that Texans Colts game, that first one, I know obviously Stroud got better clearly throughout the year. I'm not debating that. What I'm saying is that Anthony Richardson, let's not forget, in that first 5 minutes, he had 2 rushing touchdowns against the Houston Texans before he had to go out with a concussion because he hit his head on the ground and unfortunately received a concussion. I mean, I gotta wonder that's the one Achilles heel for the Houston Texans is they don't stop the run very well. Now, if you have Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor running the football with that sort of offense, again, CJ Stroud, albeit has been good. I mean, it wasn't like he was elite in that second game against us. Like he obviously had some good throws, but I mean that besides the one where he clearly caught the Colts defense slipping early in the game and got Nico Collins for a 75-yard passing touchdown. Outside of that, what was Stroud really doing in that game that made you go, wow, this dude was just dicing up the Colts? He really wasn't, right? So like if the Colts just limit that and if Anthony Richardson stays healthy, I mean, we should still be able to run the ball all over that Houston Texans team because they've never been good at stopping it, even with DeMeco Ryans there now.
Yep. So I don't know, man. And it's crazy because we literally have not seen Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson together. Like 2 snaps. That's all we've seen. So
yeah, 2 snaps.
Like we don't even talk about that. Like these two barely played at all. And the Colts still had, a top 10 offense. So you think about that wow factor that you could be adding here. Like, what does that mean if everybody stays healthy? Like, what does that mean for your offense? It's exciting.
Yep, absolutely. Give me just 1 second.
Yep, you're good. Here, I'll be right back, Derek.
All right. Sounds good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go get the hat. Hold on a second. Hold on, y'all. I was thinking maybe this hat needs to make an appearance again this year. I was thinking this needs to come back because I don't know why, but I think this needs to make a comeback. It didn't get a lot of use out of it in the 2022 season because we were trash. But I think it might be time to bring this hat back. What do y'all think? Huh? He's gonna come back and he's gonna be like, what the heck am I looking at here? Or, like we could go with this hat because I've been playing some college football lately, and my first dynasty is with the BG Falcons. And in my second season now as head coach of the BG Falcons, and now have them as the number 3 team in the nation, and on top of it, getting one of the better classes in NCAA right now. So, I mean, maybe those are something that I could accomplish. Who knows? But thank you to everybody who's tuning in right now. I greatly appreciate everyone. We're just going to wear this for when Cody gets back in. Problem is our secondary is a big question mark, and they have Diggs, Collins, and Dell. Oh, yeah, 100%. They got some great wide receivers over there, man. No doubt. AR had a 7-to-1 touchdown interception ratio before his season ended. Yeah, pretty much. I think we're going to win at Jacksonville this year. Well, Richie, I hope you're right, man. I hope you're right. Because if not, that's going to be another sad year for me. Because then I have to go on Roundtable Sports and then listen to UCF Jaguar talk for the longest time about it's another year. Mr. High Flyer Cowboy hat. Hey, it's a Jason Aldean hat, all right? If the Texans sign Justin Simmons, I will cry. Yeah, I will too. If we don't sign anyone, I'm gonna cry, to be honest with you. You still got Quandre Diggs, and you still got Quandre Diggs, and you still got Justin Simmons out there. Giving Jeepers Creepers vibes. Oh, man. Do you guys think Jonathan Taylor will have at least 1,500 yards? Well, let's see. So, let's think about that, right? So, obviously the last 2 years he's been injured. We haven't, we won't have a chance to really gauge over the last 2 years. But let's think about this, right? So, he played 15 games in 2022, had 1,170 yards. Obviously, he mentioned that he got better as the year went on. Just wasn't quite able to, just wasn't quite in the mix of it yet. But then obviously in 2021 had 330 carries for 1,800 yards. I mean, you'd have to insinuate if Jonathan Taylor averaged another 5.5 yards per carry, I mean, in order to hit 1,500 yards, he would have to have, around 270, about 270 carries, throughout the year, which, if he played 17 games, then no doubt he could do that. But that's going to rely on him being healthy. He 100% can be close to 1,500 yards if he stays healthy all year. No doubt. Howdy, Cody.
Oh my gosh. I hate that. I hate it, bro. I just don't get it.
We were talking about this needs to make a comeback this year because it didn't receive enough credit for the 2022 season.
Credit?
Yeah, it didn't deserve any credit because the team was bad last year. Or that year. So I feel like I need to bring this back.
Okay.
Or I could switch this out. And I could just wear this, because college football 25, going dynasty mode with this team, my alma mater.
How's it going?
Hey, I'm in my second season. I'm the number 3 team in the country and haven't lost a game yet this year. Only game I lost, 2 games I lost my first year. I lost against Texas A&M, who was a top 10 team in the country early in the season. And I lost in the national championship game against Georgia. Okay. Other than that, I've only lost 2 games. I'm in the top 3 now, and my commits are getting better. So I'm doing good.
Nice.
Have you gotten that game yet?
Yeah. Yep.
You had a chance to play it much?
A little bit, yeah. I played it a lot, the night it came out, or I guess the morning it came out. I stayed up, and then I played it on Friday a good amount, but I haven't played it a lot since then.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know how much I'll get to play it after this week with with content coming back into the frame. So
right.
I'm gonna play it as much as I can in the meantime. But
okay, he's been asking what was his question about the 1 to 10 on offense and defense?
Oh yeah. He was saying what do you project? 1 out of 10, 10 being the greatest defense that we could possibly imagine, or 10 being the best offense you can imagine, or 1 just being the absolute worst. Where do we project it to be at this year?
Okay. What do you say for defense?
For defense? Barring any severe injuries and having what we had last year, I would give the defense last year maybe a 3 because it wasn't good. I'd say a 5.
Okay. I was going to go 4 because I'm concerned about the safety position.
Yeah. If we'd signed Justin Simmons or Quandre Diggs, I'd feel a lot better about it.
Yeah. Same. I don't really know what Chris Ballard's doing. Is he just asleep at the wheel, or
just doesn't care?
Yeah, it's just his ego gets in the way sometimes, and it kind of infuriates me. But anyway, yeah, I would say 4 for defense. Offense, though, that's the real question.
Yeah, because it's hard to get a gauge on it because, I mean, last year I would have gave it a 6. All things considered, given the fact of how many of our weapons were hurt throughout the period of the year. I mean, to be the number 12 offense last year, in spite of having some of your worst weapons not available all year, definitely sucks. But I mean, I truly think this can be a 7 or an 8 when it comes to an offense this year. I mean, I think it could be an 8 if everybody stays healthy for the most part and, all things are moving at full speed ahead. I think it can be an 8.
Sure. Sure. I'm going to go 7 for right now because just the unknown and the exciting factor of Taylor and AR, I think that's just really exciting. And I mean, AR was, I mean, I know he had some issues as a passer, and it's not surprising. We knew that was going to be a thing. He was raw. But I think he showed enough positive things that made you excited how he looked. And so you're like, if he can just stay healthy, I think he can really build off of that and be pretty good this year.
Yeah. I mean, we don't need him to be, having these, we don't need him to be having these 400-yard games overall total yards. We don't need him to do that. We just need you to have more touchdowns than interceptions and fumbles. And if you do that and, and Shane Steichen passes the love around a little bit and the guys continue to keep having great seasons like Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman and Downs and whatnot, then and Jelani Woods too, like the offense will take care of itself. We don't need to have a ton of like these huge statistical games from Anthony Richardson. We just need you to be efficient.
You just gotta push, I think, like the ball down the field too. If you can do that a little bit more, I mean, that just changes everything. I mean, you just need one of those big plays, and that changes the whole dynamic of a game potentially. So, yeah, I mean, that was just the element that was missing from the offense last year, So, yeah. But, okay. So, yeah, we do pay attention, Charles, in the preseason. We cover all the preseason games. We cover all the cuts and all that stuff. So, yeah.
Will Latu reach 10 sacks his rookie season?
Ooh. I feel like I said 9.
I thought you did too.
So right there, I mean, obviously I love it, but I mean,
I'd
you look
love
at
to
the
say
rookies,
yes,
Derek,
but at the same time, I don't know.
Like, is he really going to go like do what Dwight Freeney did his rookie season? That's tough, man.
Especially since he's not going to be a full-time starter,
Yeah. Interesting.
I mean, he could, but I mean, I at the same time, I would not question if I would not doubt he doesn't. It's just how it is.
Yep.
Who's wide receiver 1? Pittman. Oh yeah, no question.
Yep.
Pittman is wide receiver 1, and it's not even a question.
The biggest question is who's wide receiver 2.
That's the big one. And we and we're not having the argument, guys, of like when it comes to Downs or anything, because Downs is mainly a slot guy, so it's a little bit different. It's mainly the question of A.D. Mitchell outside or Alec Pierce. So
we were talking outside wide receiver. Josh Downs primarily slot, so we weren't talking about him like he wasn't, good, better than these players. It's just not the position he's going to play, So.
What's the over-under on Latu getting more pressure rates than the other guys? So do we think Latu will have a better pressure rate than the other guys?
That's tough.
That is a tough one. I 100% will be better than Quiddy. That I'm guaranteed. Now, as far as Ebukam, that's a great question. I don't know.
Yeah, he was pretty decent last year getting
and that was Ebukam's first year as like a full-time, you are the number one guy on the edge in that sort of role. Like, I mean, and he's had time in San Fran, but he also had to share a little bit of time. Mm-hmm. But in Indy, he was the guy. So I got to wonder if his second year with Partridge now, I got to wonder if that'll help.
I wonder, just like for everybody, like, is that, I mean, we saw how much coaching mattered for the line, like in literally one season. So, like, I'm not saying that, Nate Ollie was freaking, what's his name? Chris Strausser. I'm not saying that. But, like, coaching matters. I mean, clearly. I mean, Colts went from one of the worst offensive lines in 22 to one of the better ones in 23. And you think they can only get better. And, heck, Quentin Nelson on that podcast, he literally, they asked him what changed, and he said, our coach. That was the biggest thing for us. He got us back to where we needed to be. So can Partridge potentially do that for this D-line and get them into a place where maybe they've never been before? So I'm intrigued with that. I think when it comes to Pierce, I think they will split time. I don't really think I put a ton of stock on who is quote unquote starter for the wide receiver too, because I think they're both going to see a lot of time. Now I think the snap counts are the more intriguing thing for me, Derek, is like who gets the more snaps. And as the season progresses, do we see A.D. Mitchell potentially take over more snaps on the offensive side of things if he's just thriving and, Pierce isn't really taking the leap we're hoping he can take here in year 3. So that's what I'm more intrigued about when it comes to that. But I do think they will definitely, split time to start. If we don't sign a safety who starts, Cross or Thomas, I think Cross I think we'd probably say at this point. I don't even know if Thomas is like that is the second safety on this, or the second / third, I suppose, safety on this team right now, because Ronnie Harrison Jr., remember, he started over Rodney Thomas last year, a guy who was converted to a linebacker. So I don't think the Colts are super high on Rodney Thomas, to be honest with you. And I think he has a long way to go. So I'd say Nick Cross. Who do you think leads the team in sacks this year, Derek?
I want to say Ebukam. I really want to say Ebukam again.
That's fair. That's a good one.
Because DeForest just never will, because he just gains too much respect from opposing coordinators to allow him to do that. He just does. Grover's not going to do it. Quiddy's obviously going to split a little bit of time with Law too. I think Ebukam's going to win that role.
Yeah, that's a good guess. I would probably say Ebukam, because he was far and away the best pass rusher on this team last year from a consistency, especially on the edge. I mean, clearly on the edge, but yeah, I mean, and I feel like there were times where he probably should have gotten more sacks. Honestly, I wish he would have broken just to feel good to say, hey, we got our first 10-sack guy and how long, but he essentially did. But he was, definitely a guy that I think will continue to get better, which is exciting. And I'm just curious, can he step up his game even a little bit more? Because he had some moments, Derek, where he definitely made some game-changing plays, during the course of the season. So, yeah, I don't think we talk about him enough, but I think he will probably be the guy who leads the charge there.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes the most logical sense, unless, Latu has a rookie season like we haven't seen in a long time. It's basically it.
Yeah.
If we don't sign a safety, who starts, Cross or Thomas?
Yeah, I already asked that one.
Okay.
Cross. So
yeah,
Charles was saying, which rookie do you think will have a good season? So who's going to be this year's Josh Downs, essentially? Is it A.D. Mitchell? Is it Latu?
I would say probably A.D. Mitchell, honestly.
I don't know why. I'm the same way. I'm the same way, man. I mean,
yeah, because their games are very similar, and And obviously, the position plays a lot of factor into it. I mean, Latu, I wouldn't even say, because Latu's going in right away. Nobody really knew what Josh Downs' full role was going to be when he came in. Like, Josh Downs, it had some expectations for him, but he exceeded those expectations.
Oh, yeah.
I just think there's already such high expectations for Latu. It's not the same like level. And the only other guy that I think is going to get consistent time offensively or in their position to handle anything like that, I think has to be A.D. Mitchell.
Yeah. I mean, Derek, we were talking about in that pre-draft process, like A.D. Mitchell, like so many people had him as a first-round pick. Like a lot of people had him as a first-round pick. So, and I think a lot of people were kind of scared about the potential character concerns, right, that people had with him. But, they said if that wasn't a thing, they probably would have taken him earlier. So the fact the Colts got him and they don't feel like that's an issue, And if they turn out to be right, this kid could be a major steal. Major steal.
Absolutely.
Who's going to be the RB2, Sermon, Hall, or someone else? And would they split snaps? I feel like Sermon and Hall will split. Sermon was solid. He was given snaps, and Hall should get looks on pass plays. I would agree with that. I say right now, Trey Sermon is RB2. I mean, Derek, the dude is talented. He's a very talented running back. I mean, from Ohio State, coming out, I feel like everywhere he's gone, he's produced. Like, he hasn't been the greatest guy. He's had some fumbling issues, but I mean, I think as an RB2, Trey Sermon is more than capable of being that guy. And we don't talk about Evan Hall enough, but I do think he might have a role a little bit. Like a role maybe with this offense that we just didn't see last year because you really didn't have anybody on your roster who could do it at the rate that Evan Hall did in college. So could we see kind of a similar thing with how we know how the Colts used to do it with Nyheim Hines? Like, have Evan Hall out of the backfield and, just add a new element to this offense that you just didn't have last year. I'm intrigued about that. I'm intrigued what his role is going to be.
Yeah. Sermon definitely is an interesting one for sure. Has a pretty good feel for the game, and he's pretty much all you can really ask for in a running back too. I mean, he's a bruiser. He can wear a defense down, and at the same time is versatile enough that he can, be utilized in a couple different ways, receiving wise. So, that's always a great thing to have for a running back too. And, Evan Hall is going to be an interesting one too, because, we never got a chance to actually see what he's capable of. So it'll be interesting to see how he looks in training camp this year.
Yeah. Here's a good one from Super Pony. Chuck Pagano or Frank Reich, who was worse? I have my opinion. I want to hear yours.
Oh man. Okay.
Either way,
I will say Frank Reich was worse.
Really?
I'm going to say Frank Reich was worse because here's my reasoning. Okay. So my one condition is that Chuck Pagano was actually a really good motivator. I mean, he was actually a leader of men. People respected the hell out of Chuck Pagano, which is, not something that's easy to come by in today's NFL. So again, yes, he is responsible for some of the biggest blunders in recent Colts memory. I get that. I understand it. But he also had worse teams put together than Frank Reich ever did. Okay. Now, Frank Reich also didn't have the generational quarterback. I give you that. But at the same time, Chuck Pagano's rosters were always worse than Frank Reich's. Maybe not a quarterback, but everything else was worse. Okay. So, and maybe, I wouldn't even say that. Yeah. Wide receiver, maybe Hilton, but that's about it. So at least there, he prevented his team from collapsing. They always won games. And even in the years that Andrew Luck wasn't always relevant, they had a backup quarterback and they still won, 7 games during those times. We saw, and Pagano didn't get forced out in the middle of a season because he lost the locker room. I gotta dock points on Frank Reich for that. You lost the team, bro. You lost it. They called you out, and the owner cut you in the middle of the season because you were so trash. Like, Irsay doesn't do that. That doesn't happen a lot. And you have to be that bad to have that happen. And you're talking about, I'm this offensive guru. I know how to play. I know how to work with quarterbacks. Bro, you never got a quarterback to stick around and actually look good in your scheme. The only one that was actually good was Phillip Rivers. And you never, and Phillip Rivers was at the end of his rope and he was a seasoned veteran anyway. So.
Okay. Derek, I know what you're saying, but he had a generational quarterback. Like, not just a good quarterback, a generational quarterback that literally drug his, I'm going to curse here, sorry. Drug his sorry butt to the playoffs every single year in a trash division. And I can't even tell you, Derek, how many times I watched the Chuck Pagano-led Colts freaking lose games with a generational quarterback to Brock freaking Osweiler. And I cannot forgive that. I cannot forgive that. I know they didn't have the collapse that Frank Reich had, in 2022. I'll give you that, all right? But it was like, how do you lose games with this kid? How do you lose games with a guy that doesn't come around very often? Like, I get it, the rosters, Ryan Grigson, horrible GM, probably the worst of all time, honestly. One of the, if not the worst of all time.
Yes, he had a worse GM, too. I didn't even mention that.
He had a worse GM. I'll give you that, 100%. But he had a generational quarterback in a trash division, right? And he still only won it one time. One time with Andrew Luck. That's it. One time. So yes. I guess for me, I'm like, I don't care if he had the better roster. Andrew Luck was that good. Like, him and T.Y. Hilton were that good that they literally drug the Colts to the playoffs. And again, I know that it wasn't all Chuck's fault. I'm not saying it was all Chuck's fault. I mean, clearly not. Grigson was terrible. Couldn't draft anybody to save his life. All his free agents basically were flops. But I don't know, man. It was just I think there was just a lack of fundamental understanding of what it takes to be a head coach when it came to Chuck Pagano. Great man, great leader. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a great guy. Like, I do. And I love that he's still around Indianapolis. He still loves the city. I still love Chuck Pagano as a person. As a head coach, I just don't think he was the right fit. And I just watched too many games where the Colts shouldn't have lost, or they shouldn't have, the record they had. And I think, Derek, almost to me, if you're going to be bad, just be bad, but don't be mediocre for years. Years. That's what the Colts were. Mediocre with a generational quarterback. And I think that's almost worse than just outright being terrible.
I don't know about that. I mean, they went 11-5 like 3 or 4 straight years with Andrew Luck. I mean, we never lost to the Titans. I mean, at the end of the day, if we're going to talk, I mean, we have to discuss who was actually worse at their job. And given the fact that Frank Reich was hired and we were talking about him as this offensive guru, I have question marks about it because Pagano, no one ever said Pagano was a great head coach. Only people that really thought of anything to do with Chuck Pagano was that he was a great leader. His story impacted people, and it still does to this day. And it's why it was so easy for him to gravitate towards these guys, because he's a good human being and a great leader of young men. That's how it works. But the problem you became is I would rather have a head coach that is not very well educated in being coach, but is a leader of men, than a person that claims they know what they're talking about to football, but doesn't know how to keep a locker room in check. That's my thing. Because again, the 2 years that Frank Reich, we kept talking about Frank Reich. In retrospect, Cody, Frank Reich came in. He had Andrew Luck for the first year. Andrew Luck came back. Andrew Luck was looking good, but that also was with the generational quarterback. Let's remember that. And then the next year, albeit Jacoby Brissett was the quarterback. I understand it. Then COVID happens. Phillip Rivers. You had a top 10 offense or fringe top 10 offense at that time because you added Michael Pittman, you added Jonathan Taylor, you had those weapons. And then in 2021, we saw one of the most epic collapses in all of Colts history when you had a 97% chance to make the playoffs in the final 2 games of the season. And then you lost the final 2 games of the season and to the worst team in football whose fan base went to that game mocking their owner And yet somehow, some way you lost to that team because you forgot how to throw the football in any organized way, shape, or fashion. And then in 2022, you had the epic collapse of the entire locker room because your team said this team is not coached well. This is not coached well. We are not getting it figured out. And so my problem with it is yes, Pagano had a lot of faults to him, but his own players did not call him a not good coach and didn't give up on him. That's where I stand on my criteria as who was the worst head coach. Frank Reich had higher expectations and he flat out stunk when it came down to it and a little bit of adversity. Yes, Pagano might have had the slightly easier road when it came to the generational quarterback aspect of things, but everything else around him was way worse than Frank Reich had it. And still they were able to have some kind of success. Some. Not a lot, but some.
Okay. I just watched too many games where the Colts should have been a lot better. And I just felt like they were held back. I mean, regardless, I think both coaches were pretty not great. Like, they were both pretty mediocre to bad. So, I mean, they had seasons where they certainly looked good. Yeah. But, yeah. I don't know.
Neither one of them will be better than Shane Steichen.
I already
we already know that.
Like, you can tell. I feel like you can almost like just tell like if a head coach is going to be good. Like, I feel like from year one though, like I had major issues with Frank Reich. Like, do you remember back in 2018, I believe it was? We didn't start the pod yet, but I had some issues in that Kansas City game when the Colts just like didn't like do what they normally had done, and they completely like blew that game when they probably should have won, honestly, in that game. And then that Buffalo game, I remember I was just tired of Frank Reich because he was just reckless sometimes with how he called games, and the Colts shot themselves in the foot in that Buffalo game, in that wild card game. They should have won that game. So, yeah, I think Frank Reich infuriated me more, to be honest with you.
Yes, 100%.
And maybe that's why. Like, I don't know. Like, but I mean, you can make excuses for both of them.
Oh yeah. Well, and I mean, I would only argue, like, again, when you talk about what we saw this last year, right? Frank Reich, gets when did Frank Reich get fired from the Panthers job?
Oh, the Panthers job.
Wasn't it in the middle of the season again, or was it? Did he make it to the end?
It was middle again.
So again, like, I don't know if it just like became too much for him, but he obviously showed he's not a head coach. So I think the argument kind of speaks for itself in that regard. Cause like with Frank Reich, he got fired twice in the middle of a season, shows that he is not a head coach. At least Pagano lasted for a while. I will say this though, Cody, to give you credit. If I had to choose one of them to come back in some capacity, I would choose Frank Reich as an offensive coordinator. As a coordinator, not a head coach. Frank Reich, you are responsible for just designing an offense. I'm fine with that because then there's less responsibility. There's less things he has to worry about. It's kind of like the Chip Kelly thing at Ohio State right now. Like, Chip Kelly going to Ohio State to be a offensive coordinator is the best thing for Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly's an okay head coach, but he said himself, like, I just want to get back to doing football because head coaching, there's so much more responsibilities that I just tend to not like as much. So that's what it is. Like, you being a coordinator, there's less responsibilities. You're more play and game focused, which is what I think a lot of guys jump from the coordinating aspect to go to head coaching, and they find out it's just not for everyone. And Frank Reich found that out the hard way twice.
Yeah. Yeah, he did. It definitely felt like Frank Reich's lows were a lot lower than Chuck Pagano. Like Pagano had some low moments, don't get me wrong, but yeah, they were both pretty bad, to be honest with you. But I can at least respect Chuck. I feel like I don't have any respect for Frank Reich anymore. Like I just don't, like, as a coach. Like I can respect Chuck as a coach, even if I don't think he was a great,
right.
like a great head coach. I think he's still is like what coaches should be about. Like I do. So
Yeah.
I respect him a lot more, I suppose.
And there's a lot of, maybe not quite as much in the NFL as maybe some other places, but I mean, as far as but in the NFL specifically, I think that's honestly how people are kind of getting away from the head coaches that know everything, right? Like there's tiers to this, right, Cody? Like there's the select group of guys that are up here that are head coaches, and the entire scheme runs through them, especially offensively, and they know how to get the most out of their team and know how to run a team by themselves, and they're the reason why. That's Andy Reid, Sean McVay, and maybe 2 or 3 others, maybe. Then there's the guys that they're okay at what they do, but it becomes too much. And then there's just guys that are all I need to do as a coach is just be the motivator and just keep track of time. Remember, Cody, we were talking about Bubba Ventrone being a head coach at the end of this last coaching cycle. Do we really want to sit here and act as if Bubba Ventrone knew more than almost any other head coach in the NFL right now on how to run an offense, how to run a defense, how to do all these things? No, Bubba Ventrone didn't know how to do all of that. But the thing is with Ventrone, he was really good at knowing what he did know, which was he knew how to run a special teams unit insanely well. And he's a motivator. His guys listen to him. He's a very detail-oriented person, and he gets it. So in the NFL specifically, that's why you have coordinators. I mean, you can get a coordinator that knows how to run an offense and knows how to design an offense, and defenses as well. You can get defensive coordinators that know how to run a defense, know where guys should be, how to run it, all of this stuff. But I think the problem you have is a lot of these coaches nowadays, they all want to have everything run through them, which I think was Frank Reich's biggest issue. Was Frank Reich did not want to give it up. Frank Reich did not want to give it up. He wanted all of the responsibility and fault and credit to go through him, rather than just giving some of that responsibility to other guys. Sure. I think that's what killed him.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think he just was. Yeah, he was not that was what's so frustrating. It's Frank, you can admit it's too much. If it really is too much for you, hand it off to Nick Sirianni or whoever. That. There's no shame in that. But he just was almost too prideful to let it go. It was weird. I'm just man, it's clearly too much for you. It's okay. It's not no one's gonna judge you for it. Because it is a difficult thing to do. Not everybody can do it, but you can still have a say in the offense, but you don't have to be the play caller all the time, And I think even Nick Sirianni, I think he probably learned from Frank Reich's honestly faults of because remember he called plays for a while and then he gave it up. And he said, I don't need to be the play caller. And he gave it to Shane Steichen. And, and we saw what happened with the Philly offense then. So I think that's just something that, that was his biggest flaw, was he just was too stubborn, too set in his ways. And he didn't allow, he just didn't have that awareness. It didn't allow him to become aware to what he needed to be aware of as an NFL head coach. And if you're stuck in your ways and you're not being aware of things you need to be aware of, then you're going to fail ultimately as a head coach. So I think that was kind of his biggest issue.
Yep. Anything else you want to talk about while we're here?
I think we covered a lot of it.
We're at an hour and 20 minutes now.
Yeah, it's a good stream. So I guess one other thing, not really Colts related, but we have over 500 people, Derek, that are listening via via over Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Guys, if you could do us a big favor real quick before we hop out of here, head over to our YouTube channel if you would not mind doing that. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe, hit like on it as well. We'd love to get that. We'd love to get, likes up and whatnot. But also, Derek, we would just love to continue that push to try to reach that goal, that lofty goal that we have of 20,000 subscribers. Right now, we're just a hair under 1,500 away from that. So if you guys would do me a big favor and do that, that would be awesome, because you guys rock. Colts Nation, we're getting back into it, and we're going to continue to pump out the content, and we want you to be a part of what we do, because we only stream, we don't live stream it. We haven't live streamed a ton. I mean, we're going to definitely as the season, gets closer here in the next couple weeks and months. But we want you to check out our other stuff too. So be sure to go do that as well. So we are excited for this season. But that's all I got, Derek, unless you got something else.
I don't, man. It was nice to have this stream and, kind of get back into the swing of it. I mean, guys, we are so close. 4 days from now, we're going to be talking about Colts training camp and actually have some real football to talk about. So very fantastic news, guys. So close to having this back to it. And like we said, guys, we're going to be at training camp on Saturday this upcoming week. We won't be there Thursday, but we'll be there Saturday. Can't wait for Cody and I to get over there and do some more content. Hopefully get a chance to see some of you guys. So please be sure to stop us. Let us know if you're going to be there. But thank you guys so much again for all the support. Be sure to hit that like button, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. And as always, guys, go Colts.